And joining me this evening, my colleagues from the Patent Literacy team, Kirsten DeRoche, Lisa.
Pam, do you want to hit record?
It is recording, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So Kirsten DeRoche, Andrew Bell, and Lisa Bola. I don't think I've seen Francine yet this evening, but certainly if she's here, we welcome Francine Dujicic as well from our EL team. So we are so honored to have Virginia Gonzalez with us this evening to talk about phonological awareness. And of course, Dr. Elsa Cardenas-Hagen is back with us again. She has been here for every single book club meeting. Thank you so much, Elsa. We have learned so much from you. And we're so honored too that this is being recorded. If you have colleagues who have not been able to attend, please tell them that these recordings are usually
yes, I know you don't like my audio.
A day or two on the Patent YouTube channel. Okay, so I'm not going to waste any more of our time. We're going to spend our time learning from Dr. Gonzalez and from Dr. Elsa Cardenas-Hagen. Take it away.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank you so much. And thank you for this wonderful opportunity. It's been, I mean, it's always a give and take, and we learn from each other, and it just motivates us to keep doing this wonderful work and keep, you know, rolling up our sleeves and working and doing the very best we can. But I'd like to introduce Virginia Gonzalez, who was the state director for dyslexia in the state of Texas, who is a certified academic language therapist and working on becoming qualified instructor for dyslexia. She's an expert at assessment and has worked very diligently. She has worked very, very diligently in, you know, the design and working in national testing products that we use for the assessment of students who struggle with learning to read, especially learning to read across languages. And so I was just talking before here that it'd be great to, you know, really put what we know into print for assessment. So take it away, Virginia.
Okay, so Miss Pam, do I have the share screen to pull up the short PowerPoint?
Yes, you have. I made you a co-host earlier, so you should be able to share a screen and show your PowerPoint.
Okay.
Pam, there are a few people still hanging out in the waiting room.
Okay.
I'm a bit, unfortunately, they ended up getting admitted one by one. So
okay, well, we'll
let
work
me
on
go
that.
grab them.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. I appreciate that.
Yep.
Okay, so does everyone see my screen? Because now I can't really see anybody. All I see is.
That's right. We see it.
Okay, so Dr. Hagen, I'm going to ask if you go ahead and introduce the book for our group tonight.
So I think most people have been here for the other weeks. If you're not, really the purpose of this book is really to help you know more about evidence-based literacy and understand language and literacy development. We're going to go through each of the key components. Tonight, we're going through phonological awareness with Virginia Gonzalez to really look at what do we know and what are some strategies that can strengthen these English learners' phonological awareness development. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Pam, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, because I lost y'all there for a second. Dr. Hagen, were you done? I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm done. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to get started, and I know that several of the ladies are going to be taking the questions. So I have my notes. So whenever y'all want to stop me with the question, or maybe I'll take a breath, come up for air, and stop in between the slides. But do feel free to ask questions regarding phonological awareness. So let's get started. And of course, my screen won't advance. See, I told you, Pam, I'm not good with technology. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing, Pam. I'm sorry for the recording.
That's okay. We'll figure it out. Don't worry.
Okay, let me try this again.
There we go.
Okay, there we go. Okay, I apologize for that.
Oh, no worries.
Okay. So last week, Dr. Treatise and Dr. Hagan both talked about the National Reading Panel Report and that big 5 components of reading instruction. But tonight, we're going to narrow that discussion on one of those big 5 components. So I do hope you have your book with you tonight, because we are going to peruse chapter 4 and build a deeper understanding for phonological awareness and how this develops among speakers of other languages. We will also discuss some strategies to improve this transfer of phonological awareness from a student's native language to English. So just to review, let's go back and look at the developmental components of phonological awareness, which includes rhyming, alliteration, syllable awareness, and phonological awareness. So keep in mind, rhyming is one of the early signs of emerging sensitivity to this linguistic hierarchy that we'll be talking about tonight. So words like hat, cat, that, and that are all rhyming words. Students who can hear rhymes will recognize that onset letter, which is the initial sound, before the vowel sound. And remember, the rhyme is the vowel and the final consonant sound in words that rhyme. When we review alliteration, remember it involves matching spoken words with similar onsets, such as words like dog, doll, and dig. This skill can also include the common initial sound in an alliteration at the level of a sentence, such as Sammy saw 7 sailors swimming. Let's say that again. Sammy saw 7 sailors swimming. It can be a little tricky sometimes for some of us. Moving on, syllable awareness is that understanding that words can be segmented into smaller units. Students are taught how to hear a syllable with the loudness of the vowel sound, as well as the opening and the closing of the mouth. Students will identify how many syllables are in a word. They'll blend those syllables to make a word, or they'll be deleting a syllable to create a new word. So early phonological awareness skills such as rhyming, alliteration, syllable awareness, all are important because they facilitate that development of early letter sound knowledge. But before we move on, let's review phonemes. Remember, a phoneme is the smallest unit of sound that can change the meaning of a word. Tasks at this level will include phoneme identification, both at the initial and final position of words, blending phonemes to create words, segmenting words to hear those individual sounds, as well as deletion of a phoneme and manipulation of phonemes. Keep in mind, all of these tasks with phonemes is important for when students begin to learn to blend sounds, to decode, as well as segment sounds for early spelling skills. So as we move on, we need to remember that people possess the ability to learn to communicate and read in multiple languages. Studies show that a student's phonological awareness can be transferred to another learned language, keeping in mind the similarities and differences between these 2 writing systems. Although the research is limited on bilingual development, bilingual children can transfer knowledge from their native language to the second language. The research has reported both positive and negative transfer might occur in this process. And Dr. Hagan, feel free to jump in anytime during this presentation. Positive transfer is when knowledge of the student's native language benefits progression in the second language. And its negative transfer is when knowledge of the native language results in errors in the student's second language. So an example of a negative transfer would include the difficulty of hearing the long E sound for the short I vowel sound, or the substitution of the S, which makes the S sound, for Z, because Z does not exist in Spanish.
Virginia, may I ask you a quick question?
Of course.
The slide is the first slide still. Have you been advancing slides? I'm
Yes,
assuming.
I have. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so
I
let's-
thought possibly that was the case. And so we still are seeing just the first slide, which is fine because we're still learning, of course, with everything that you're telling us. But I thought perhaps that was the case.
so
let's
I've
see.
advanced again. Has it
Yes,
changed?
now we see, and on the,
Yeah.
we're seeing the Spanish to English, Arabic to English, Vietnamese to English, and Chinese to English.
Yeah.
That's a slide that we're seeing.
Okay, so that is where we are in the
Okay,
presentation.
good.
So
Perfect.
everybody's good, right?
Yep, yep. Just checking in.
Okay.
Thank
So,
you.
Virginia, I just want to mention, and I know you're going to talk about some of the studies, but we really not, so when we look at these languages across languages, I mean, the correlation between Spanish to English, if I had a 1.0, that would be a perfect correlation. And in the studies that we've been involved in, it's been 0.92, which means we are 0.08 off from it being a perfect correlation. So as we look at this, we're seeing it's not so language specific, but we're really processing those sounds. And so, how we approach this will be in giving credit for what they know.
Right, absolutely. I mean, it's just like myself trying to learn Spanish. I use what I know in English to help me better understand my skills and progression for Spanish. So yes, ma'am. So in chapter 1, as Dr. Hagen was telling us, in chapter 1, Dr. Hagen does present some of those common spoken languages by English learners in the United States. And in this chapter, we're going to give a brief discussion for the similarities and differences across languages for Spanish to English, Arabic to English, Vietnamese to English, as well as Chinese to English. So these will be brief, they won't be lengthy, but they do provide us with that foundation to get started. So again, as teachers, we know from research that we can facilitate the English language literacy development by providing instruction that will build on the students' native language and literacy knowledge. That's just what Dr. Hagen was just telling us, the studies that they've done. So we want to take what they know and move them into the unknown. So starting with Spanish, which is the most common language spoken among English learners in the United States, we know that both Spanish and English have consonant and vowel sounds represented by an alphabetic symbol, which we call letters. Spanish has 23 sounds, while English has 44 sounds. Many sounds in Spanish and English directly transfer from one language to another. Both of these languages do share common syllable patterns, such as the consonant vowel, the consonant vowel consonant, which are we call the CVC words. We have multi-syllable patterns that are the same, such as the vowel consonant consonant vowel pattern. The key thing here is that the vowel sound in English will change, while the vowel sounds in Spanish are regular and don't change. The English language also includes the vowel R, the vowel pair, the vowel consonant E, and the final stable syllable, which we talk about the 6 syllable types in English. So it's important that the English learner need to know these 6 syllable types, because the 6 syllable types determine the vowel sound. So again, if you have your book, which I hope you do, on page 51 and page 52 of chapter 4, some charts were provided to provide further information on the Spanish to English transfers. On page 51, we do have a table regarding diphthongs across Spanish to English. And on page 52, we have a table regarding Spanish to English syllable types. So you do have some additional support there as well. Was there a question, or was that a dog?
That was a dog.
Oh, okay.
So let me ask you, so I just want to do a few for you, just so that you can see that even in the English language, we have a sound like I, and just think about how it's represented. In English, it could be an I by itself, or an I with a consonant E, or an IGH, right? In Spanish, I is like AI or AY. And so A, and a lot of times even Spanish speakers and adult Spanish speakers and educators don't realize those connections. And so when Virginia's describing this to you, I think it's very helpful to use that chart so you can see, oh, I don't have to speak the language to know, look what's the same, and look at these sounds that can transfer.
Any other questions at this point, Pam?
Yes, just one question I just saw. Are these charts handouts available for those of us who do not have the book? So I will check with Elsa on that. And if
Okay.
so, we'll put them on the palette.
So we reprinted those from a previous book that I did with other authors. I will ask.
Okay,
about
thank you,
that.
Elsa. Yeah, and there was a request, if possible, if you could read some of the sounds.
Oh, you want to do that, Dr. Hagan? Because
Okay.
I'm not a fluent Spanish speaker.
Okay, so I gave the sound in English of I, and then English has the sound ow, like in the word out. And so in Spanish, we might use something like the AU, ow, autobus, right?
Mhm.
Or in English, we have A, right? Like A or A consonant E, or like EY or AYA. We have EY and EI in Spanish. Re, pene. We have the OI, OI and OY. That's a direct transfer. That happens in the two languages, right? But some of the things that are difficult, we think about that sound ooh, with the W. And actually, we do have that in Spanish whenever you have that combination of that UE, cuento, cuatro, UA, UE, right? UI, cuidado. So those are so, so important as well.
Thank you, Dr. Hagan. Another commonly spoken language in U.S. households is Arabic. The Arabic language also has consonant and vowel sounds represented with 28 letters. There are also 6 syllable types, with the consonant vowel being the most common in Arabic. Now, keeping in mind, while Arabic uses consonants heavily, English uses more consonant clusters when forming words. So some Arabic words will use 2 consonant clusters in the beginning of a word, but they'll never have the 3 consonant cluster in the beginning or at the end like we do in English. Also, the Arabic does have 3 primary vowel sounds that are very similar to English, such as the vowel sounds for A, I, and U, which both are long and short, but Arabic does not have a vowel sound for the letter E or O. Another common language that is spoken in the United States includes Vietnamese, which consists of 24 consonants and 11 vowels. There are no consonant clusters, but they too have common syllable patterns such as the CV, CVC words. They have multisyllabic words, syllables such as CVVC syllable patterns. Again, English also has consonant sounds that are not found in Vietnamese. Some examples would be that that W sound that Dr. Hagan was talking about in the words such as water, or the T sound in toy, G in girl, Ch in chair, or the J in judge, or the digraph SH, like shoe, and its rare voice counterpart in the word measure. Possibly the most well-known consonant sounds that are very specific to English, which are very difficult for these second language learners, will include the English R sound, and the soft and hard digraph TH, such as in the word thing or this. Vietnamese does include vowel sounds that are very similar to English, such as the short vowel sound I and in the word kid, the short vowel sound U as in cut, as well as our famous schwa in words such as attack. Keep in mind, Vietnamese is considered a tone language. This means that it uses the pitch of a phoneme sound to distinguish word meaning. In English, changes in pitch are used to emphasize or express emotion, but not to give different word meanings to a sound. Finally, yes, is there a question?
Not at this time.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. Last, Cantonese is a dialect of Chinese. It consists of 19 consonants and 11 long and short vowels with 11 diphthongs. Again, common syllable patterns will include the consonant vowel or consonant vowel consonant pattern. Each syllable again carries a tone. So Cantonese or Chinese is a language that uses tone when providing meaning in their words. English has more vowel sounds. Some examples would be, okay, I'm going to try and enunciate these so that everyone can hear the difference. These speakers will have difficulty pronouncing words with sounds like ship, sheep, it, eat, full, fool. They also have difficulty distinguishing sounds between the letter R and the letter L. So they may pronounce rake as lake and rice as lice. So you can already see when we know these things about these different languages, we'll know that these are just natural transitions from children moving what they know from their first language into a second language.
We do have a question. Oh, I'm sorry.
Stop right there just for a moment.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
these are not anything that's atypical. So nothing's wrong with them when
No.
they make these error patterns, number one. And number two is that we can introduce this. And by the way, you're never going to get them into speech and language pathology, right? Because they're going to be working on that. But what I want to point out is we can teach them, you know, how do you make that sound? Ooh, well, I have to lift that tongue up behind my front teeth, right? And then how do I make that sound? Right? I got to round those lips, make it vibrate in front. So we, in order, you know, Virginia just talked about how they produce them, but first we have to see, can they process them? And then can we help them with the actual motorical production so that then they can get to that phonological awareness, right? What they process and what they say, you know, and how they speak, that's all connected.
We do have a question, if you don't mind, and there may be others, but I'm looking at one right now. Some of us in this call have many different languages represented in our schools that are not listed on the charts. Do you have any suggestions on ways to gather information about phonological sound transfer? My school has a very large Bengali, Punjabi, and Urdu populations in addition to Spanish. And thank you. And that comes from Eileen Hovey. I hope I pronounced it right.
Pam, I'll just say too that I put a link to the presentation that Beth Christopher did regarding transfer issues. I'm currently working on getting her handouts, and I'll also add those to the Padlet as an additional resource.
Okay, thank you.
I know that Dr. Hagen in her library, I know that she has books on that very thing about what to expect in those languages. I know I have books, several books, as well on the similarities and differences of different languages.
Yeah. So we, you know, so my background is in, you know, you never think that you ever need your, I never thought I would need my linguistic background for anything except, you know, work in my previous life of head trauma. But what so what were the languages that you were mentioning? Urdu was one.
Urdu, Punjabi, and I'll have to go back, but I think it was Bengali, Punjabi, and Urdu. Yes.
Okay, Urdu, the first two languages are from,
We've lost your, I think.
okay, can y'all hear me?
Yes, now, yes, we can.
Okay. I do know that there's many books out there. I don't have books. I think I know I have some literature. I know I have stuff on Urdu, but the other two, I don't think I do. But I know that there's tons of resources out there. I know Dr. Hagen can probably speak to that as well, but you'd be surprised, you guys, at how much information is out there just Googling those languages, how many websites can provide very, very helpful information.
If that question is answered, and any resources that you do have, for Urdu, and others, if you sent, if you would send those to us later, we
Yeah.
would definitely put them on the Padlet. So
Yeah.
just as an FYI. There was a question about developmental norms for speech in other languages. Is there a resource for that?
Okay, Pam, you're breaking up for me. I'm catching bits and pieces of your question.
Okay.
So at the American Speech and Hearing Association, we have some resources that you can look at for phonemes. And here's what I want to say. When we look at the development of speech, it's a natural process. Reading is invented, but we typically see how sounds are developed. And, typically you do see these vowel sounds develop first, and then you see the sounds made with the lips, no matter what the language is. Then you see them being able to lift the tongue. So they're able to do sounds where the tongue is lifted up, hitting right behind the teeth or the palate. And then you can see some of those back sounds. And so at the American Speech and Hearing Association, there are many resources, but also perhaps what I'll do, and just kind of take a note, and I'll add some slides for next week just to kind of teach you how to go from the front of the mouth to the back of the mouth, and how to fix, because I do want you to correct. There's nothing wrong with having an accent. Perfectly fine. We all have, but it's how you produce the sounds with precision that makes a difference, because how I listen and process and how I say it will be how I read it and write it and spell it. And so I'll make a note to myself to kind of put in some of those slides about how we kind of help this. But as Virginia was saying, this is what's expected. We expect them to have challenges to, produce those sounds of R and L, and those, short vowels like versus and and the discrimination issues.
So would you suggest, Elsa, then for ASHA, if they're looking for these phoneme transfers, because we've also had Burundi, Swahili, Fulu.
Wow.
Pashto.
Wow.
So I could be pronouncing those wrong too. So my apologies if I am, but yes. So lots of different languages, and so wonderful information. But would you suggest ASHA for those phoneme transfers? Because I know.
Yeah, because ASHA is just, they really have great resources, and have experts in many of these languages. And then, like Virginia says, when we can't find something, we dig and dig through the internet till we find it.
Yeah. Yes, Google is a wealth of information. Okay. Any other questions, Pam?
I think we're good for now. So thank you so much for taking all those questions. We really appreciate it.
Oh, no worries. I'm like you, some of those languages, I'm not even sure I've heard all of them. So, wow. Okay. So moving on, we are going to look at principles of effective instruction, which include teaching activities systematically and explicitly. And while I wasn't part of the book study for the first couple of weeks, I do know in those early chapters, systematically and explicitly are defined and talked about in those early chapters of our book. But just to review, a systematic approach presents materials in a manner that allows for introducing, reviewing, and practicing concepts. Explicit instruction requires use of what we call straightforward, consistent, and precise language for direct teaching of all skills, as well as continuous student-teacher interaction. And so the key thing I'd like to point out for this slide is learning is never assumed. We don't assume anything when we start working with our kiddos. So keeping that in mind, we also need to remember that the National Literacy Panel on Language Minority, Children and Youth stated that the instruction also needs to be adjusted to our English learners' proficiency level in the instructional language, as well as include their cultural knowledge. So when preparing to teach these phonological awareness skills, as noted in the slide, it's important to determine those sounds in English that we've been previously talking about, those other languages. Where do we get that information that don't exist in our students' native language, to ensure that the opportunity is there for our students to learn? It's also helpful for English learners to have knowledge of the English vocabulary that we're going to use in our lessons. So we would need to be sure that we're teaching that. And I know that chapter 7 of our book will be discussing vocabulary and effective principles for teaching vocabulary. Okay, so again, as we discuss, the components of direct instruction include teaching these concepts using clear language, as well as having our students engaged throughout the student-teacher interaction. It's good that you dialogue. Kids, we don't know what's going on if we don't get them to participate and engage in the lesson. So keep in mind, in this chapter, we're going to model when teaching phonological awareness skills such as rhyme, alliteration, syllable awareness, and phonemic awareness only in this particular chapter. So again, I hope you have your book, because I'm going to refer you to the book, as well as Dr. Hagen. I'm sure will have additional information to provide support. But the first activity under the category of phonological awareness is rhyming. Rhyming in the first language as well as in English. We want to make sure we're making connections with words that are similar in sound patterns when rhyming. For example, if you're at the top, if you go to page 55, we have an activity where there's a possible script that can be used for introducing a possible rhyming activity with our student. So if everyone's at the top of 55, you would see that activity, as well as we're going to follow up the rhyming activity following up in English, which is at the bottom of page 55. So Dr. Hagen, I don't know if you want to follow up on that, or if we're ready.
So I think one of the main things that I'd like to contribute, if I may, Virginia,
yes,
that what happens, we don't typically, not being able to rhyme is a warning sign in the early years that they are potentially going to be at risk for reading difficulties, right? When you don't have these phonological awareness skills intact, is it because nobody taught you, or because it's going to be a problem and you had the opportunity? So now I just want to tell you that level 1 is rhyme identification. In level 1, what we want them to do is be able first to identify. And so that sometimes we have children generate rhymes and we never even saw, can they rhyme? Did we explain what they're doing with their rhyming? So we want them to identify. And Virginia, you can maybe model that in English for them.
yes. So for example, you would give them, you would ask them, give them like a set of words: hat, cat, bat. And then you might say dog, which word doesn't rhyme. Or you might ask them to give you a word that rhymes with hat, cat, bat.
Right. And so when you're asking them to give you a word that rhymes, that would be at the generation.
Right, the generation, yes.
And a lot of times teachers say, well, what do you do when they can't do that, when they cannot generate a rhyme? And we're trying to build this auditory task. And so what we do is I'm like, okay, you know what? I know it's against the rules. We're not supposed to show print when we're doing phonological awareness. Oh my. But I'm going to scaffold and I'm going to show them, look what I'm doing. So here's my alphabet. Let's say at. Now let's put the b in front of it. Bat. Let's put cat. Let's make a fake word with d, dat. And we're going through and we're really teaching them that when you're rhyming, you're actually changing the beginning sounds. Then they kind of get the gist. Now I'm going to take away all that print and see if you can do it on your own by just processing those words and manipulating that sound.
May I ask you a quick question, Elsa? This is PM Castro. I'm sorry, but as I told you earlier, in the midst of this whole week, we're training new letters trainers. And today was around module 2, around the speech sense of the English language. But I'm just curious in other languages, because I don't know. But we know that rhyming is predictive of later reading skills, but it doesn't hold its predictability over time. That in English, right, it's the phoneme that makes the difference. It's the phoneme that we want to get them to the phoneme level, because that's what we're doing. We're mapping graphemes to phonemes. And so I'm wondering, Is it the same in other languages? You know,
Oh, yes.
rhyming has
So
predictability
yes,
for
the
a
answer to
little while.
that is yes. The answer to
Yes.
that is yes. Even in languages that are syllabic, that across, you know, what is rhyming? It's a manipulating, of those first sounds. And in other languages, that rhyming definition of rhyming is very very broad. It's not as specific at times. And I'll give you an example. So if I said the word, listen to this word, you may not know what the words are. If I said the word oso, and someone might tell me that a word that rhymes with that one in Spanish would be peligroso. And so you'll see all of that in rhyming words, where I really, in training, I want you to be very strict in your definition, because we're trying to get to the level of the phoneme, and it's at the level of the phoneme that will predict future reading ability. And that is even in languages that are syllabic, like the Spanish language. And that's where we get all of this, how do I describe to you? It's kind of like misinformation. I mean, we didn't start really investigating this until the year 2000 with the Biliteracy Initiative and grants by the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development and Institute for Education Sciences. And this is when we began to discover that, oh my God, it's just as important. And it really has good value to predict, and even in languages that are syllabic. And so you'll find, like in other languages, so for example, like in Hebrew and English that are, not alphabetic, that, that phoneme matters.
Well, and I think also, Dr. Hagen, it's these rhyming, alliteration, and syllable awareness that actually get our kids to the phoneme where they can play with individual sounds, correct? It's these early, very early skills that we use these to help get them ready for the skills with phonemic awareness. Would you not agree?
So we typically do these kinds of activities in preschool classrooms and kindergarten classrooms, and that's fantastic. But it's by the first grade, towards the end, for sure by first grade, we would expect for these, if I'm at the end of the first grade and I had all this opportunity and I still can't do this, there's a problem. We know.
Right.
This question comes from Anne Marie Gibbons, and so it's really applicable here, so I'm going to jump in, sorry. But are these activities applicable to older students? I know the answer, but I certainly want to hear from you and Virginia. So
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I know Dr. Hagen and I've had these conversations too. I think I might adjust my teaching approach, my style a little bit. I might, I want to be sure that I am cognizant of an older student who's in middle school or even high school, but I don't have any difficulties doing stuff like this with my older students at all. I don't
tell you, yeah, even if you have adults. So I've even worked with adults that, do not have literacy. And I say, some of what we're missing in these adult literacy programs is, did we go back and really teach the structure of the language? And did we make sure that they can process? Because that's going to tell us about how they can read, write, and spell. And so as Virginia's mentioning, I want to be very adult-like, or very, if it's an adolescent or somebody, older, I want to be very respectful of, where they are in their maturity, but I want to explain, we're going to do this because this is a little piece in your brain that isn't quite, and it's necessary for you to be a proficient reader. And we are going to do these skills to have you master them and, be on that journey towards successful literacy.
Right. I think it's just the buy-in to help them understand why they're doing what they're doing. I think once it's that explanation that Dr. Hagen was just talking about, it's the buy-in, and they also know they're in a safe environment, so they don't have to worry about looking so cool, because they're not with their other peers most of the time, at least with me. So I think it's the buy-in, and once they understand that, I really haven't had any trouble at all.
And I can tell you, I've worked with some middle school students where they tell me, ma'am, we're going to skip, but we are going to come to your
To your class.
because we're learning something, but don't tell we're skipping.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And so, you know, they know that they're getting better. And so, and they know the value, but we treat them very respectfully and explain the why.
Right.
Yeah,
I agree.
We have many, many, many questions. What we can do, as we've done before, we can send them to you, Dr.
Oh,
But,
no,
it's up to you.
You can go ahead.
Can we get
Okay.
through alliteration and syllable?
Yes, let's do
Because
that.
I'm almost done with
Yeah,
those, and
yeah.
then we can start the questions
Sure,
if you
sounds
want.
good. Yep, whatever you
Okay.
want.
Okay, so as we move away from rhyming and move into alliteration, which in my opinion, rhyming pretty much prepares students for alliteration. And again, they're essentially identifying those common initial sounds. Again, we can begin with just having them listen and identify the common sound that they hear in the word, or they as well as repeat it and identify the common sound. And again, I'm going to suggest that we use words that sound across that are similar and sound similar that are across the two languages, such as Manuel makes mangoes. And again, this activity can be extended where the teacher gives them the beginning alliteration and have the student complete it, such as Manuel makes. So, but keep in mind, students will need to understand vocabulary and the grammatical features for creating an alliteration in English. Once students have an awareness for syllables, I'm going to, again, the chapter talks about using words that are similar across the language again, such as mango, melon, doctor, pasta, piano. Keep in mind that in Spanish, some of those vowel sounds will be enunciated differently than in English. But again, students are asked to listen and repeat, blend and delete syllable to form words. And again, in your book on page 48, there is a possible script where students are being asked to listen and provide those possible activities for the different types of syllable awareness. But I do, one of my favorite things that I do want to mention, and Dr. Hagen touched on this, is having kids use mirrors to watch their mouth as they're trying to identify when they hear a syllable, because the mouth will open and they should see their mouths open when they're saying multisyllabic words, as well as another activity would be to print the word in large font, cut the word into its syllable parts, and then have the student put the word together as they're saying the word, which becomes very multisensory. And finally, as we move into phonemic awareness, keep in mind the most important piece for me in this chapter would be working with those sounds that don't exist in the first language. And again, I'm gonna mention what Dr. Hagen has said, that they may not be able to hear that sound, and if they can't hear it, then it's going to be difficult for them to say those sounds. And again, having them use their mirrors and actually telling them how that sound is made, like the digraph th, where they're putting their tongue between their teeth. I mean, watching kids see themselves do that for the first time can be quite exciting for some of our kids. And again, on page 57 of chapter 4, if you have your book, some possible scripts have been provided so that you have an idea how to present some of these lessons. So in addition to learning the different sounds, kids are learning meanings of words and how those sounds are represented in print. So again,
what I love is also, you know, when we talk about that cross-linguistic transfer, you know, what is a syllable? Well, it's every time you open your mouth, you're producing a syllable because it has a vowel sound. I mean, that would be true. And So here's my syllable in the Spanish language because I opened my mouth and I produced that vowel sound. What's a sound? You know, the concept of a phoneme transfers across the languages, right? And, you know, this I think is very important. And when Virginia's describing, you know, when they can't get it, you can put in and make these visual representations, right? We want to build the auditory channel, but some of our scaffolds include, you know, visual representations. Then we take it away so they can build that auditory channel. So we are bringing in these things. And then when Virginia spoke about, you spoke about the vocabulary. They may be able to do these sounds, but they don't probably know what the word. And what will we do different for an English learner is then we would say, you know what, let's talk about some of these words that we've been working on.
I know Pam said there were a lot of questions. So at this point, Dr. Hagan and Miss Pam, I don't know where you want to move forward at this point. If you want to just work on the questions or.
Yes, I'd be glad to do that. So
Okay.
yes, we have many. We have 14 minutes. We'll cross our fingers here. So I think we're gonna have a rich conversation. Okay, so let me start here because we have a lot.
Oh, goodness.
So, yeah, no, that's good. This is from Heidi. The data that we collect for phonology and phonics is a program called Acadians, DIBBLES. The reading specialist, classroom teachers, and our MTSS team seem to think about, oops, I moved too far, that our ELs are not grasping phonology, rhyming, substituting, and deleting sounds, syllables, compound words, etc. The speech pathologists understand what happens with shared sounds between the languages. It is difficult to express to our colleagues that they need to incorporate native language, native language sounds, cognates, and explicitly teach letter sounds by showing the students exactly how sounds are produced by modeling the position of the tongue, etc., and how and where sounds begin in the mouth.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think then Dr. Hagan will probably come back as well. Whenever I assess, I need to know what they know in their first language first before I can start saying, is this an issue in the second language? So as a diagnostician, I always start with what they know in their first language, regardless of instruction. So I don't know, Dr. Hagan.
So I'm just gonna.
Right. So I think the idea there is really looking, you know, we can't, you know, it may be a part of that second language acquisition and, you know, what is the same from first language to second language? And then what can we take from that first language that will help us to get to the precision of the second language, processing these new sounds and producing these new sounds. But I might have missed what the exact question was.
It was right.
Let's see, go back up, and Heidi Sykes, if you'd like to unmute yourself, that would be great. Sometimes it takes a while to unmute too.
Right.
I've been there. So, okay, so I will we'll hold off on that until Heidi maybe can join us. So there was a question. Oh, there's Heidi. Heidi, are you able to unmute and maybe share a little?
There it is.
There you go. Let's see how we can help with that. Well, there she is. Yay. Hi, Heidi.
Hi.
So is there anything we'd like to add to what your statements and?
Well, so can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. So my dilemma typically is that wait, I'm sorry, Bella, I'm gonna have to plug in my headphones. So can you hear me? So my dilemma is usually that, you know, they bring up L's, sometimes it's warranted, sometimes it's not in MTSS, but first of all, they don't teach phonology to an L, or, you know, the classroom teachers and the reading specialists. They don't teach phonology to L's like they would to native they try to teach them in the same way. So it helped with the speech pathologists did a PD on linguistics, and all the fricatives and the voiced and the unvoiced and all those things. It was really helpful the way they did it. It was awesome, and the reading specialists loved it, and they they embrace that. And so when they do teach in our intervention groups, they do teach that. They make sure they use the mouth and and teach those.
I think, yeah. So I think that's what Virginia was
Mhm.
describing, that, using your mirrors, you can see yourself as you produce the sounds, and make sure you have the articulators in the right place.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, thank you, Heidi. There was a question from Ms. Sawyer. You suggest using nonsense word. I guess the question is, do you suggest using nonsense words with L's? In that case, there's no content to connect to. So do you suggest that?
Well, I don't, I know I don't, because I want to teach them words in English. I mean, because I'm thinking language proficiency in English. Dr. Hagen, I think we've had this discussion before in previous, even when we train teachers using nonsense words. So many of our kids need the language support in English, because many of our kiddos come from homes where only Spanish is spoken and not as much English. So I would prefer to use English words, unless Dr. Hagen, I'm missing something on
No,
the
no. So there's nothing wrong with doing the nonsense words, but we do use real English words. And then what Virginia's describing is, as we go through, because really using an English word at a time might even seem like a nonsense word. You don't even know what it means, right? And so but we do extend. I think what's different about the English learners is we not only work on phonological awareness, then we extend it to vocabulary and really, hey, did you know, right? And we'll be talking about vocabulary instruction later in the book, but every opportunity we get, as Virginia is mentioning, we try to bring in oral language vocabulary, and we try, and we don't want to work in silos. And so any opportunity we get for teaching words, and certainly within the phonological awareness activity, we can do this, and the students do appreciate that.
Next question. This is from Eileen. It says, one question I have, and it's not finding the information about this topic of this week, but I Googled and asked native speakers of the Hindi, Bengali, and some other languages from India. Our parents and students will spell a word in English, such as the word literacy, but this is an unknown word. The reader will spell the word out loud, Literacy. The students will then think and say the word out loud correctly. Have any of our students encountered this way of reading? I found that many students who are in grade 1 have challenges switching from memorized style to learning how to read based on the phonemes and later using morphemes. So, and again, if you'd like to unmute Eileen, just to elaborate, that would be fine too.
Okay, I'm sorry, Pam. I didn't understand the question. There was a lot of feedback. Maybe
I think I got a little bit of what was being discussed. I think the question is whether, so is it good to, so in English, it's good to break apart into the syllables, right? And we try, and it's kind of like analytic and synthetic, that we try to take those words apart, then put them back together. That's what good readers do. And, next week we'll be talking more in depth about those syllable division patterns. But is the question, so if they can't get, is it the question that they can't get even the syllables? So then do you go to the sound and work on blending those sounds together? I'm wondering if that was it. And what I also do, and what I also make sure of, so like, let's say the student has difficulty, blending the sounds together. What is what is highly recommended, and what I highly recommend, is that when you're working on that, work on sounds that are voiced continuant sounds. And the reason I say that, what is a voiced continuant sound? It's a sound that when you produce it, vocal cords, your voice box, it's on, and it's a sound that you don't stop abruptly. And so if I were to say the word like lamb, that would be a very good one. Lamb, lamb, right? And so that will help me to blend those sounds together, especially if I'm having trouble blending it. If I'm having trouble taking it apart, maybe I would start with a simple 2-syllable word that had maybe closed syllables and voiced consonants. So I think that would be the way I would try and attack that, both doing, analytic, taking apart, synthetic, putting back together. Virginia, what more do you have to add to that?
Well, I think that this very activity you're talking about goes back to enriching the English language. I mean, if they don't have the word lamb in their vocabulary, I mean, they may hear the individual sounds, but then they're trying to figure out, okay, what is that word? It's a word they may have never even heard before. So that's why I'm saying vocabulary is so important, that we need to teach that. So I think that's why we need that. I don't know how else to put it. Vocabulary is huge for our second language learners.
I have another question, and maybe we'll have time for one more. And as we've done in the past weeks, we'll send along questions that didn't get answered to Dr. Cardenas-Hagan and to Virginia as well. This is a question that was asked earlier, so want to make sure I can try to get it in. Many of the programs in higher ed, we know this, do not teach the science of reading. And so they're wondering about programs for English learners, and what are some programs or universities that you might recommend that, okay, sorry.
No, do you know that you're hitting a big button with me, and my blood pressure just went sky high?
Yeah, I don't think I kept a poker face when you were reading that. So it was like, oh.
So I can't keep the poker face. You all know I'm all heart and passion. So we have a problem, Houston, we have a problem, like they did to the, so we have the same issues in our universities, that the science of reading, the science of reading is not being taught in our universities. And I see Dr. Holly Baker Hill is here, and she goes, good luck with that one. Because I had this discussion with her, and I've been having these discussions, and I'm having them, and I'm to the point where I'm going to reach out to media and have more of them and put a little bit of pressure. The reason for this book was really the hope that someone in higher education would look at, can we teach the science of reading to English learners? And can we teach these individuals that are multilingual, and these experts in our schools that are multilingual, can we teach them the science of reading, not in one language, but in 2 languages, and what you do, when you do it, how you do it. And I'm just going to tell you this, all the students that I serve, they are bilingual, and they may be dyslexic, and they all end up, the bilingual dyslexic, and they all end up biliterate. And I won't have it any other way. But it's what you do, when you do it, how you do it. But what we need is, we need to be empowered with the knowledge to know what to do and how to do it, and really break this down. Phonological awareness, and I'm just going to give an example. In a state that might not use the Common Core state standards, that they don't even have that in the standard for literacy in Spanish, that you don't need to worry about phonemes. They have no mention of phonemes. It's just everything you work on syllables. So then the teacher who's teaching English literacy is like, well, the children don't know sounds. Well, they may not know in the native language, but did they not know it because no one taught them? Or is there really a disability? So we have to figure it out and know what was done with them, right? And so the idea for this book really came on, can we teach the science of reading to individuals who will be working with students who are, learning more than one language, and who may be bilingual learners. They might be simultaneous learners where they're doing it at the same time, or sequential learners. No matter what, when you have good instruction, right? And when you teach all of these components and the structure of the language, like we talked about, like I talked to you about in those earlier chapters, then the student will be knowledgeable in language, language structures, but also in literacy. And that's the only way to get to biliteracy. I mean, we're going to always work on oral language proficiency. We're going to always work on vocabulary. We're going to always work on, the ultimate meaning of comprehension. But if we don't get the mechanics of reading down, these foundational skills, we're not going to get to those high levels of comprehension, because these inhibits you to get there. And we're not going to work in silos either. And that's what I talk to these communities and people at, higher education. I'm not saying that you're not going to do everything that you've done. You're going to continue doing that work, but we need to add these components that Virginia has described today. And by adding these components is very good. And, I mentioned the book, Multisensory Teaching of Basic Language Skills, and I see Holly Baker Hill is here, and she was very responsible for, putting together all the terminology and all the glossary, and really helping Dr. Judith Bursch with that seminal book on, the science of teaching reading. And so thank you for being here, Holly, and the work that you're doing in the state of Colorado. But I just want to say that this is why this book was written, because we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. And we're not saying that you can't work on vocabulary and you can't always work on oral language. Yes, you must. Every individual needs that, but include this into what you do, and do so in a systematic and explicit manner. Don't leave any stone unturned.
Right. We don't assume anything. Right.
Well, that's an inspiring way to end such a wonderful night. Thank you so much, Virginia.
I don't know where the time goes.
That hour goes so fast.
Oh, I
know. It really does. It does. So next week, joining us, of course, will be Elsa again. And Virginia, I think you're going to come back just.
Oh, yes. If you don't mind. Dr.
Oh, my gosh, we're glad to have you back. And Kenneth Ness, you're going to tell me how to pronounce that, Nesser, will be joining us as well. And the topic we'll be focusing on is phonics. So we're very excited.
And from those questions, thank you for your questions, because then that gets me ideas. And so I'll add some slides and then I'll send them to you, Pam.
Okay.
Just what came up tonight. Let me kind of prepare and kind of add to what we're going to talk about next week, so that we really get everything answered. And that's what the give and take is about. So I love the question.
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Thank you, Virginia. Thank you.
Thank you for asking me. Yes. I'll see y'all next week then.
Okay. All right. Don't leave yet. For those of you, of course, who need Act 48 credit, remember you need to attend each of the sessions. I'm going to do the poll. Make sure you do the poll, and we'll see you all next week. A big thank you to Kirsten DeRoche and Lisa Bola and Andrew Bell for joining me as well from Patton. Thank you so much, all of you. We really appreciate your time. Stay safe and healthy. We'll see you next week. And here comes the poll.
Good night.
Make sure you do the poll. Thank you, Elsa. Thank you, Virginia.
You're welcome. Good night, ladies and gentlemen.